The sun had not yet risen when Jacob walked out of his small farmhouse, his boots sinking into the soft, wet earth. The smell of morning dew and soil filled the air. His land stretched far and wide, golden and quiet, the kind of peace only a farmer knew. He rubbed his hands together, ready to start another ordinary day. But that day was not ordinary, and nothing would ever be the same again. Jacob was a simple man. He lived alone, with only his old dog and the endless rows of crops to keep him company. He had once dreamed of a big family of children running through the fields, but life had taken that dream away. Now, the silence was his only friend. He walked toward the far edge of his land where the fog hung thick like a white blanket. Something glittered between the crops. At first he thought it was a piece of metal, maybe part of a tractor or a tool left behind. But the shine didn't look right. It was too clean, too strange. He stopped walking. The glitter moved, his breath caught. Jacob stepped closer, pushing the tall grass aside. What he saw made his hands freeze. Two small figures lay in the dirt, tied together with thin glowing ropes. Their skin shimmered with a faint blue light, smooth like glass, and their faces looked too soft, too perfect to be human. They were children. Alien children. For a moment, Jacob could not breathe. His mind tried to find a reason. Maybe this was a prank. Maybe he was dreaming. But then one of them moved, letting out a weak sound like a soft cry. It was real. It was alive. He dropped to his knees beside them, heart pounding like thunder. The smaller one had long white hair, tangled and covered in dust. The other, maybe a boy, had short silver strands that caught the first light of morning. Their eyes were half open, wide and glowing faintly. When Jacob touched the ropes, they burned cold against his fingers. He quickly pulled his hand back. "Please," a tiny voice whispered. Jacob looked down. It was the girl. Her voice trembled as she spoke. "Don't send us back. Please." Jacob felt a chill run through his spine. He didn't know who she was talking about, back to where, but the fear in her voice was something he understood. It was the sound of someone who had already suffered too much. He looked around. The field was quiet. No cars, no planes, no signs of anyone else. Just his land, the fog, and these two strange children left here like they were nothing. Jacob's farmer instincts told him to walk away, to call someone, maybe the local police or the army. But another part of him, the human part, the father part, couldn't leave them. They were small, helpless, scared. They didn't look dangerous. They looked lost. He took out his pocket knife and hesitated for a second. Then with one firm motion, he cut through the glowing ropes. The light faded, the ropes dissolved into thin air, and both children gasped softly, their skin glowing brighter for a moment, then dimming again. Jacob took off his old jacket and covered them. "You're safe now," he said quietly, not knowing if they could even understand him. The boy blinked, his eyes full of confusion, but he didn't speak. The girl reached out a trembling hand and touched Jacob's wrist. Her skin was warm, almost human. He gently lifted them, one in each arm, surprised by how light they were. They felt fragile, like glass birds. He started walking back toward his farmhouse, his heart racing faster with every step. His mind screamed questions. Who tied them up? Where did they come from? Would someone come looking for them? When he reached his porch, his old dog barked once, low and nervous. The twins flinched at the sound, and Jacob whispered, "It's okay. He won't hurt you." He carried them inside, laying them on his old sofa near the fire. He lit a match, started the fire, and watched the room fill with warm light. The twins curled together, shivering. He brought them water, but they hesitated, sniffing it like it was strange to them. Finally, the boy took a sip. His hands were shaking. Jacob sat down beside them, his hat in his hands. The question still filled his head, but when he looked at their faces, exhausted, frightened, and innocent, he stopped thinking. "Who could do this to you?" he whispered. The girl's lips parted, but only one word came out. "Humans." Jacob froze. Outside, a faint rumble echoed through the distance like a low thunder. But it wasn't thunder. He stepped out to look. Far away, beyond the fog, lights moved across the sky, silent and searching. Jacob didn't know what those lights were, but deep inside, he felt something heavy in his chest. He looked back at the children sleeping by the fire and whispered, "You're not alone anymore." The wind carried his words across the quiet fields, and somewhere in the distance, the lights began to move closer. Jacob carried the two alien children inside his small farmhouse, the wooden floor creaking under his boots. The fire flickered weakly, throwing shadows across the room. He placed them gently on the couch, then stood back, unsure what to do next. His hands trembled a little, not from fear, but from confusion. What was he supposed to do with two alien children tied up in his field? He poured warm water into an old bowl and brought it to them. The girl stirred first. Her eyes opened, bright silver like moonlight, and she looked around, frightened but curious. The boy followed, blinking fast, his breathing shallow. When they saw Jacob, they pressed close to each other, holding hands tightly. "It's all right," Jacob said softly, trying to smile. "You're safe here." The twins didn't answer. They didn't even blink for a few seconds. Then the girl whispered something in a language Jacob didn't understand. Her voice was soft, full of worry. The boy responded with a short nod. Jacob sighed. "You don't understand me, do you?" he murmured. He walked away for a moment, fetched a piece of bread and a jar of honey, then placed it on the small table near them. At first, the children only stared. But when the smell of food reached them, hunger won over fear. Slowly, carefully, the boy reached out, broke a small piece of bread and tasted it. Then his eyes widened. He tore off another piece, gave it to the girl, and they began to eat fast, too fast. Jacob smiled sadly. They must not have eaten for days. "Easy," he said gently. "There's more." After they ate, the boy's eyes began to close again. The girl leaned against him, whispering softly in her strange tongue until he fell asleep. Jacob covered them with an old blanket and sat down on his chair by the fire. He looked at their faces, peaceful now, and felt something inside him he hadn't felt in years. Care. He didn't know where they came from. He didn't know who hurt them. But he knew one thing. He couldn't let anyone take them away. Outside, the night was silent except for the wind brushing against the windows. Then, around midnight, the dog started barking, a deep, uneasy bark. Jacob rose quickly and stepped to the window. Across the dark sky, strange lights moved slowly, white, then red, then gone. They weren't planes. They didn't make any sound. He watched them hover for a moment above the hills before vanishing behind the clouds. Jacob's heart began to pound. Someone or something was looking for the twins. He walked back to the living room. The children were still asleep, the girl's hand clutching the boy's tightly. Jacob knelt down beside them. "Who are you?" he whispered. "What happened to you?" The girl stirred, her lips moving as if in a dream. "No more cages," she whispered weakly. "Please." Jacob's chest tightened. He didn't understand everything, but he understood pain. Whoever these children were, they'd been treated like animals. He couldn't let that happen again. He stayed awake until morning, sitting near the fire with his shotgun across his lap. The old house creaked, the wind howled, but he didn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw those lights in the sky again. When dawn came, he stepped outside. The air was cold and heavy with mist. In the soft light, he saw something new, strange marks in the dirt near his fence. Heavy boots, deep impressions. Someone had been there in the night. His stomach twisted. He rushed back inside, closed all the windows, and locked the door. The twins were awake now, watching him. The girl pointed toward the marks outside, her eyes wide with fear. Jacob knelt beside her and nodded slowly. "I saw them too," he said. "Don't worry. I won't let them take you." She looked into his eyes, and for a moment something passed between them. Understanding. She reached out, touching his hand, and though she didn't speak his language, her meaning was clear. "Thank you." Jacob smiled faintly. "You don't have to thank me, kid," he said quietly. "You just need to stay alive." The rest of the day he worked to hide any sign of the twins. He cleared out a small space under the floorboards in the barn, lined it with old blankets and straw, and made it a secret hiding place. He tested it. No light leaked out, no sound could be heard from outside. It would be safe. When the sun began to set again, Jacob guided the twins there. "This will keep you hidden if anyone comes," he explained, showing them the small door under the boards. The boy nodded shyly. The girl took one last look at him before crawling inside. That night, Jacob sat near the barn listening. The silence didn't last long. Within an hour, the hum of engines filled the air. He stepped outside and saw beams of light sweeping across the fields. Soldiers. He held his breath, crouching low. Voices echoed faintly, men shouting, radios crackling. They were searching for something. Jacob's heart beat faster. He looked toward the barn, toward the two small lives hiding inside, and gripped his shotgun tighter. "I won't let them take you," he whispered to himself. The soldiers stopped near his fence for a while, scanning the area, then moved on. The lights faded into the distance. Jacob stayed awake till dawn again. His eyes were heavy, but his purpose was clear. He was just a farmer yesterday. But now he was something more, a protector. And whatever was coming next, he knew one thing for sure. He wasn't going to give those children up. Morning sunlight poured through the cracks of the old barn, painting thin lines across the dusty floor. Jacob opened the hidden hatch quietly and peered inside. The twins were awake, sitting close together, whispering in their strange language. When they saw him, they stopped, eyes wide with worry. "It's just me," Jacob said softly, his rough voice calm. "You're safe." The girl tilted her head, studying his face. Slowly she crawled out, followed by the boy. They looked tired, their skin duller than before. Jacob handed them some bread and milk. They hesitated, then accepted it with shy nods. Watching them eat, he realized they trusted him now, just enough to stay close. After breakfast, Jacob sat on an overturned crate and rubbed his forehead. Questions filled his mind like a storm. Who were they? Why had someone tied them up in his field? And those lights last night, were they human ships or something else? He decided to try again. "You come from where?" he asked, pointing at the sky. The girl blinked. Then she tapped her chest and said softly, "Leary." Jacob smiled faintly. "Leary," he repeated. Then he pointed to the boy. The boy hesitated, then said, "Cow." "Leary and Cow," Jacob said slowly, nodding. "I'm Jacob," he pointed at himself. "Jacob." The twins looked at each other and then said it together. "Jacob." Their voices blended like music. He couldn't help but laugh. "Yeah, that's me." Hours passed as he tried to talk with them, using gestures, drawings, and words. It was hard, but bit by bit they began to understand. Leary seemed older, maybe 12 or 13, while Cow was younger, maybe 8. She often spoke for him, her voice always soft but filled with care. When the evening came, Leary pointed at the scars on Cow's wrists, thin, glowing marks where the ropes had once been. Then she looked at Jacob and spoke slowly, carefully forming the words. "Humans hurt us." Jacob's smile faded. "Humans?" he asked quietly. She nodded, her silver eyes trembling. "Cages, tests, pain." Jacob felt the air grow cold around him. He leaned forward, his voice low. "Who did this?" Leary pressed her hand against the floor and drew a rough shape in the dust, a building with towers and fences. "Big house," she said, then mimed the sound of machines and screams. "We run, we hide." Jacob's stomach twisted. He'd heard rumors about secret military sites far from town, places where strange lights were seen, where people vanished. But he never believed them. Until now. Cow suddenly whispered something to Leary. She nodded, then reached into her torn clothing and pulled out a small metal chip. It shimmered faintly with blue light. She placed it in Jacob's hand. "Keep," she said. "Bad men. Find this." "We die." Jacob turned the chip in his fingers. It was warm, humming softly, unlike anything he'd ever seen. Whatever it was, people were willing to hunt children for it. He stood up, pacing slowly. His mind raced between fear and anger. The government? The army? Someone powerful was involved, and if they found these kids here, he'd be next. "All right," he said at last, tucking the chip into his coat. "No one's finding you here. I promise." That night, he sat by the window with his shotgun again. The wind blew through the open cracks, carrying faint sounds, engines maybe far away. He could feel danger creeping closer. He thought about the children sleeping in the barn, about Leary's trembling voice when she said, "Humans hurt us." He hated that sentence. It made him feel ashamed of his kind. But at the same time, it made his purpose clear. If others had lost their humanity, he wasn't going to. As the hours passed, he drifted into uneasy sleep. But before dawn, a sharp knock echoed through the quiet house. He froze, another knock, louder this time. Jacob grabbed his gun and moved to the door. Through the small window, he saw 2 men in black uniforms standing outside. Their truck's engine hummed softly behind them. "Morning, sir," one of them called out. "We're from the Department of Scientific Affairs. We're doing a survey in the area." Jacob opened the door slightly. "Survey out here?" "Yes." the man said with a polite smile that didn't reach his eyes. We're looking for something unusual. You haven't seen any strange animals, lights, or objects, have you? Jacob felt sweat slide down his neck. Animals? No, just me and my crops. The man's eyes scanned the room behind Jacob, sharp as a knife. If you do see anything, he said slowly, you should report it. For your own safety, Jacob nodded. Of course. When they left, Jacob watched their truck disappear down the dirt road. Only then did he exhale. His hands were still shaking. He walked to the barn quickly. The twins were awake, their eyes wide with fear. They had heard everything. Leary looked at him, her small hands gripping Cow's arm. Jacob knelt beside them. They won't find you, he said firmly. Not while I'm here. For the first time, Leary smiled faintly. Cow reached out and touched Jacob's sleeve as if to say thank you. Outside, the sky was calm, but Jacob knew it wouldn't stay that way. The men would come back, and when they did, it wouldn't be for questions. He looked toward the horizon and whispered, I'll keep you safe, no matter what it takes. Night had fallen quietly over the farm, but Jacob couldn't sleep. The wind outside was restless, carrying strange sounds across the fields. The twins were asleep in the barn, hidden under the floorboards. The small silver chip they had given him glowed faintly inside the drawer of his desk. He kept staring at it, unable to shake the feeling that it was more than just a piece of metal. His dog growled suddenly, low and warning. Jacob froze. Through the window he saw faint lights moving along the dirt road, headlights too steady to be random travelers. His chest tightened. They're here, he whispered to himself. He grabbed his shotgun, pulled on his coat, and stepped onto the porch. The night air was cold, sharp. The lights grew brighter, closer. 2 black vehicles stopped near his fence. The sound of doors opening echoed in the still air. 4 men stepped out. Dark uniforms, heavy boots, rifles slung over their shoulders. Their faces were hard, expressionless. One of them held a small scanner, its red light sweeping across the field like a hunting dog sniffing for prey. Jacob walked forward, his boots crunching on the gravel. Evening, he called, trying to sound calm. The lead soldier turned toward him. Evening, sir, he replied in a practiced voice. We're with the Department of Security and Xenobiological Control. We're investigating an incident that occurred nearby. Jacob kept his face blank. Incident? The man nodded. There's been a breach. Too dangerous. Specimens escaped from a containment facility. They may have come through this area. Jacob's heart thumped painfully, but his voice stayed even. Specimens? You mean animals? The soldier hesitated, studying Jacob's eyes. They're not animals. They're something else. If you've seen anything unusual, anything at all, you need to tell us. For your safety. Jacob forced a small laugh. Only unusual thing I've seen lately is the price of corn. The soldier didn't smile. He signaled to the others, who started scanning the field. The red light passed over Jacob's barn. He tried not to look. After a few tense minutes, the soldier stepped closer. You live alone? Yeah, Jacob said, his fingers tightening on the gun hidden behind his leg. Always have. The soldier's eyes moved toward the house. Mind if we take a look inside? Just a quick search. Jacob's heart pounded in his ears. You got a warrant? He asked quietly. The man smiled thinly. We don't need one for non-human containment. Jacob stepped in front of the door. Then you're not stepping inside my house. The soldier's smile faded. For a moment, no one moved. The cold wind whistled between them. Then the man lowered his voice. Sir, if you're hiding what we're looking for, you're committing treason under interplanetary security law. Jacob didn't flinch. I don't know what law says a man can't protect his own home, he said firmly. The soldier stared at him, his jaw tightening. Then he signaled his men to back off. Fine, but if you see anything, you call us immediately. For your own good. They turned and began walking toward their trucks. Jacob's shoulders relaxed slightly, but then one of the soldiers stopped near the barn. The scanner in his hand beeped once. He frowned and aimed it at the ground. The device blinked red. Sir, he called. I'm picking up something. Jacob's blood went cold. The lead soldier turned back. Where? By the barn, sir. Jacob's mind raced. If they opened the door, they'd find the twins. He had seconds to decide. He forced a grin. That barn's full of old junk, metal scraps, engine parts. Scanner probably picked that up. The soldier ignored him and walked toward the barn. Jacob followed, trying to look casual. The man reached for the latch. Jacob coughed loudly and said, "You boys don't want to go in there. Smells like something died last week." The soldier didn't stop. He opened the door and froze. A deep growl filled the dark. Jacob's old dog stepped forward from the shadows, teeth bared, eyes glowing in the light. The soldiers jumped back. "Easy there," one of them shouted. Jacob smirked. "Told you." The dog barked again, snapping at the nearest man's boot. "Call it off," the soldier demanded. "Don't move," Jacob warned. "He doesn't like strangers." The soldiers backed away slowly. The lead man looked furious now. "This isn't over," he said coldly. "If we find out you're lying, we'll be back with orders." Jacob didn't blink. "You know where to find me." The truck started up and rolled away, their engines fading into the distance. Jacob stood there until the red lights disappeared over the hill. Only then did he lower his shotgun. His dog whined softly, pressing against his leg. He walked quickly into the barn and lifted the floorboards. Two glowing eyes looked up at him, Leary and Cow, both trembling. "It's okay," Jacob said, his voice shaking slightly. "They're gone." Leary's lips quivered. "They—" "Come back," she whispered. Jacob nodded slowly. "Yeah, I know. That's why we have to leave." Cow clutched his sister's hand. "Where go?" Jacob looked out across the dark fields, the place he had worked his whole life. It had always been his world, his safety. Now it had become a battlefield. He turned back to them. "Anywhere but here." Outside, a faint hum filled the air again. He looked toward the sky and saw a flicker of silver light between the clouds. Whatever was searching for the twins, it wasn't just human. The night was darker than usual. Clouds hid the moon and the farm seemed to breathe with fear. Jacob packed quickly, throwing food, a blanket, and a small toolbox into an old canvas bag. His hands shook as he worked. Every sound felt too loud. The twins watched from the doorway, their silver eyes glowing faintly in the dark. "It's time," Jacob whispered. "We can't stay here anymore." Leary held Cow's hand tightly. "Where go?" she asked, her voice soft and trembling. "Somewhere safe," Jacob said. "Away from soldiers, away from anyone who'd hurt you." He crouched and looked them in the eyes. "You trust me?" Cow nodded. Leary hesitated, then whispered, "We trust." Jacob smiled faintly. "Good. Then we move fast and stay quiet." He pushed open the barn door and stepped into the cold night. The grass was wet and every step made a soft crunch. In the distance, faint red lights blinked in the sky, drones still searching. Jacob's heart raced. They had to reach the river before sunrise. He lifted Cow onto his back and took Leary's hand. "Stay close," he said. They slipped into the tall corn, vanishing into the darkness. The stalks brushed against their faces, whispering like ghosts. Jacob led them through the fields he had planted with his own hands, rows of gold that once fed his peace, now hiding his rebellion. Halfway across, a low hum filled the air. Jacob froze. Above them, a drone hovered, its red sensor sweeping the ground. The light passed dangerously close. Leary gasped and Jacob pulled her down, covering her with his arm. "Don't move," he mouthed. The drone hovered for a few seconds, scanning, then drifted away toward the hills. Jacob waited until its sound vanished before standing. "Let's go," he whispered, his voice tight with fear. They ran again, faster now. The wind picked up, bending the crops. When they reached the edge of the field, the open plain stretched ahead, flat, exposed land leading to the river. Jacob knew it would be risky, but there was no other way. He looked back toward the farmhouse one last time. It stood quietly, dark and still. That little house had been his whole life. Now it was a memory. He turned away and began crossing the field. Halfway through, headlights appeared on the distant road. Engines roared, trucks down. Jacob hissed. They dropped behind a pile of hay bales. Soldiers jumped out of the trucks, shouting orders, their flashlights slicing through the dark. "They're close," Leary whispered, her hands trembling. Jacob took a deep breath. "Listen to me. When I say run, you run toward the river. Don't stop, no matter what." "But," Leary began. "No buts," Jacob said firmly. "You get your brother to safety." "Understand?" Leary nodded weakly. Cow clutched Jacob's sleeve. The soldiers spread out, moving closer. Their scanners blinked red again. One of them shouted, "Over here!" "Tracks!" Jacob cursed under his breath. "Now!" They ran, the fields exploded with light and noise. Soldiers shouted, drones circled overhead, engines roared. Jacob sprinted with all his strength, the twins running beside him, their small legs pumping desperately. Bullets whistled past, striking the dirt. Jacob turned sharply toward the old irrigation ditch. "This way," he yelled. They slid down the slope, mud splashing their clothes. The ditch led straight toward the river. The sound of water grew louder. Jacob could see the silver surface ahead, shining faintly through the darkness. But the shouts behind them were growing closer. He pulled the twins forward, half running, half dragging them. "Almost there," he gasped. A bright beam cut through the fog. One of the drones found them. The red light locked on, alarms blaring. Soldiers opened fire again. Jacob shielded the twins, his arm burning as a bullet grazed past. They reached the small wooden boat Jacob had built years ago for fishing. It was old but sturdy. He pushed it into the water. "Get in." Leary hesitated. "What about you?" "I'm right behind you," Jacob said. She climbed in with Cow and Jacob shoved the boat away from shore. Bullets splashed into the water around them. The current caught the boat, pulling it downstream. Jacob jumped in, grabbing the oar. He rowed hard, his muscles screaming. The soldiers reached the riverbank, shouting. "Stop, you're surrounded!" Jacob didn't look back. He kept rowing, faster, stronger. The fog thickened, hiding them. A blinding flash lit up the sky behind, the drones scanning, the soldiers firing blindly. Then, silence. Only the sound of the river remained. Jacob dropped the oar and leaned back, gasping for breath. Leary sat near him, holding her brother close. Her eyes shimmered with tears. "We safe?" she asked quietly. "For now," Jacob said. "But they won't stop. They'll follow the river." Cow reached into his coat pocket and pulled out the silver chip again. It glowed softly, pulsing in rhythm with his heartbeat. "Help coming," he said. Jacob stared at it. "Help? From who?" Leary looked at the stars through the mist. "Home," she whispered. Jacob followed her gaze. The clouds parted slightly, revealing a distant cluster of stars. For a moment he saw what she saw, a place far away, beyond war, beyond cruelty. He smiled tiredly. "Then let's get you home." The river carried them into the fog, away from the only world Jacob had ever known. Behind them, flames rose faintly in the distance. The soldiers had found his house. Jacob didn't look back. He held the oar tightly and whispered, "We keep going." The river carried them through the fog for hours, silent except for the soft splash of water against the wooden boat. Jacob's arms burned from rowing, but he didn't stop until the sun began to rise over the horizon. The light revealed steep cliffs on both sides of the river and thick green trees that swallowed the sound of everything. When they finally reached a quiet bend, Jacob guided the boat toward the bank. He pulled it ashore and helped Leary and Cow step out. Their feet touched the soft moss and they looked around, blinking at the sight of birds and sunlight filtering through tall trees. "This place," Leary whispered. "Safe?" Jacob looked around carefully. The valley was hidden, surrounded by rock walls that stretched high into the clouds. "Safe enough," he said. "No one will find us here." He led them up a small slope and found an old wooden cabin, half broken and covered with vines. It must have been abandoned decades ago. Still, it had a roof and 4 walls, and that was enough. "This'll do," Jacob said, pushing the door open. Dust floated in the air like tiny stars. He set his bag down and turned to the twins. "We'll stay here until things calm down." Leary nodded, but her eyes looked distant, full of worry. Cow sat on the floor, holding the glowing silver chip in both hands. Its light pulsed softly, matching the rhythm of his breathing. Jacob knelt beside him. "What is that thing, kid?" Cow hesitated, glancing at Leary before whispering. "Home. Beacon, beacon," Jacob repeated. "Like a signal?" Leary nodded slowly. Call our people. They find us, but need time. Need charge," Jacob frowned. "How long?" She looked at the chip, thinking. "Maybe in many suns. Maybe few," Jacob sighed. "Then we make this place home until it's ready." He spent the next few hours cleaning the cabin. He patched a hole in the roof with an old tarp, built a small fire pit, and found an old fishing net near the river. The twins helped in their own way. Cow used his strange energy to light the fire without matches, while Leary gathered fruits from the nearby trees. She seemed to know which ones were safe to eat, even though she had never been on Earth before. When night came, they sat around the fire. Jacob cooked some fish while the twins watched the flames dance. For the first time since he'd met them, they looked almost happy. Cal smiled shyly at Jacob. Good, he said, pointing at the fish. Jacob chuckled. Glad you like it, Leary tilted her head. You help us. But why? Jacob stared into the fire for a moment before answering. Because someone has to, he said quietly. You were hurt, scared, alone. I couldn't just walk away. Leary studied him, her silver eyes soft. Not all humans. Bad, she said slowly, as if learning the words from her own heart. Jacob smiled faintly. No, kid. Not all of us. Outside, the stars filled the sky like diamonds. Leary and Cal stepped out of the cabin, staring up. They whispered to each other in their own language, words soft and musical. Then Leary looked back at Jacob. See? She said, pointing upward. Our stars. Home far, Jacob followed her gaze. Yeah, he murmured. But you'll get there again. I promise. Days turned into weeks. Jacob taught them how to plant vegetables, fix fences, and fish. They learned fast, laughing when they got things wrong. The valley became their world, peaceful, green, and hidden from everyone. But peace never lasted long in Jacob's life. One evening, as he was chopping wood, he noticed the birds had gone silent. The air felt heavy. His dog, who had followed them downriver, began to growl. Leary stepped out of the cabin, her hand glowing faintly. Something near, she said. Jacob scanned the trees. A faint hum echoed through the valley, distant but familiar. The sound of engines, faint but approaching. No, Jacob whispered. They found us, he ran inside and grabbed the silver chip from the table. Its glow was stronger now, pulsing fast. Leary gasped. They coming? The soldiers? Jacob asked. Leary shook her head. No, our people. Jacob blinked, confused. Your people? Then, before he could finish, the sky above them lit up with a bright blue light. Through the clouds, a massive shape descended, silent, silver, and shining. The trees bent under the wind it created. Cal shouted, pointing upward. Home ship. Jacob's mouth went dry. That's a ship? Leary smiled through tears. Yes, they find us, but the relief lasted only a second. From the far side of the valley, the roar of engines filled the air again. Not one, but many. Human ships, smaller but faster, chasing the light. Jacob's heart sank. They're both coming. Leary's smile faded. The alien ship hovered above, its light growing brighter. The ground trembled. Soldiers' voices echoed through the trees, closer every second. Jacob grabbed the twins' hands. We've got to move, now. They ran toward the rocks at the edge of the valley, hiding behind the trees as beams of light swept the ground. Above them, the two sides closed in, one to rescue, the other to destroy. Jacob's mind screamed only one thought. He had to protect them until the very end. The ground shook beneath Jacob's feet. The hidden valley that once felt like a sanctuary now trembled with chaos. The alien ship hung in the sky like a floating moon, its surface glowing blue and silver. Beneath it, human soldiers poured into the valley, their floodlights slicing through the mist. Jacob held Leary and Cal close behind a rock outcrop. The children clung to him, their eyes wide with fear. Stay quiet, he whispered, gripping his shotgun, though he knew it was useless against what was coming. From above, the alien ship's light swept across the valley, soft but powerful. It wasn't attacking, it was scanning, searching. A deep hum rolled through the air, vibrating the ground. The soldiers below shouted into their radios. Targets confirmed. Both lifeforms are here. Leary flinched. They know, she whispered. Jacob's jaw tightened. Then we end this here. He looked up toward the ship, its blue light reflecting in his tired eyes. He didn't understand the technology or the reason these children had been hunted, but he understood one thing. They were innocent. He pulled Leary and Cal closer. You see that ship? That's your home. You're getting on it tonight. Leary shook her head desperately. No, you come too. Jacob gave a sad smile. No, kid. They won't take me, but I'll make sure you reach them. The wind roared as human soldiers moved closer, stepping through the trees. One shouted, Surrender! You're surrounded. Jacob stood up slowly from behind the rock. The twins gasped. He raised his hand slightly, pretending to give up, his old shotgun still slung over his shoulder. I'm just a farmer, he shouted back. Ain't got what you're looking for. Step away from the children. A voice commanded. Jacob didn't move. They're not yours to take, he yelled. The soldiers raised their weapons. In that second, everything slowed. Larry's hand began to glow. Bright blue light pulsing through her skin. The silver chip in her pocket vibrated violently, sending sparks into the air. Cal grabbed it and the light exploded outward like a wave. The soldiers stumbled, shielding their faces. The alien ship above responded instantly, its underbelly opening with a blinding beam of blue. Jacob turned to the twins.
Go, that's your signal.
Leary shook her head, tears streaming down her cheeks.
They shoot you.
I'll be fine, Jacob lied.
Now run.
The twins hesitated, then sprinted toward the clearing where the beam shone down. The soldiers saw them and opened fire. Jacob stepped out from behind the rock, firing his shotgun toward the lights. The sound echoed through the valley. Bullets tore through the dirt near his feet. He kept shooting, not to kill, but to draw their attention away.
Over here,
he shouted, running across the field. The soldiers turned their guns toward him. Above, the alien ship lowered slightly. Leary and Cal reached the beam of light, which wrapped around them like a shield. They began to rise slowly, their small figures glowing against the night sky. Jacob looked up, a smile breaking through his fear. "Go home, kids," he whispered. A bullet struck his shoulder. He staggered, falling to one knee, pain flashing across his face. But he kept his eyes on the twins, now halfway to the ship. Leary screamed his name. The ship's light intensified, shaking the valley. The soldiers stopped firing as their radios went dead. The blue glow spread across the entire clearing, and suddenly everything went silent. The alien ship released a soft hum, deep, sorrowful, and then, with a flash, it was gone. The soldiers were left standing, confused, surrounded by silence and smoke. Jacob lay in the grass, breathing hard, blood soaking his sleeve. The stars above looked brighter now. Something shimmered beside him. A small silver cube floated down from the sky and landed gently in his hand. It glowed with the same soft light he had seen before. He heard Leary's voice, faint but clear, coming from the cube. "You showed us what humanity means. We never forget." Jacob smiled weakly. "You better not," he whispered. The soldiers approached slowly, weapons lowered now. One of them, a young man, knelt beside Jacob. What happened here?" he asked, his voice trembling. Jacob stared at the sky. "Miracle," he said softly. "You wouldn't understand." Above the valley, the clouds began to part, revealing the stars. For a moment, one star shone brighter than the rest, then moved, disappearing into the distance. By morning, the soldiers were gone, the valley quiet once more. Only Jacob remained, sitting by the fire with the silver cube beside him. The light inside it pulsed gently like a heartbeat. Days later, the world would wake to news reports of strange signals from orbit, of peace messages sent from beyond Earth. Governments would deny, argue, and speculate. But Jacob would know the truth, because in one forgotten valley, 2 frightened alien children had found what humanity truly was, and a simple farmer had reminded the universe what kindness could do. He looked toward the sunrise, whispering, "Take care, kids." The wind moved softly through the trees, and for a brief, shining second, Jacob thought he heard 2 familiar voices whisper back, "Thank you, Father." The valley glowed gold under the new day, and for the first time in years, Jacob smiled without pain.